People tend to define themselves based around what they really like or are passionate about. Maybe you're passionate about a particular football team or hockey team, and when you hear somebody talk badly about that thing, you tend to take that criticism personally. Some people feel like these things that they're passionate about represent who they are, so when that thing comes under scrutiny, sometimes they can feel personally attacked vicariously. If you don't like that thing, you must think that my taste is poor and that I'm less of a person because of it. Whether it be a sports team or a TV show or even a video game, people often have a unique and special relationship with the subject of their passion. They take ownership of it. And oftentimes when they hear someone else saying they enjoy that thing, it can feel like they're encroaching in on their unique and special relationship with that thing that they admire so much. Probably the one thing that I'm the biggest fanboy of right now more than anything is Type Moon and their beloved Fate franchise. What started out as a very niche and obscure series in the early 2000s went through several major surges in popularity, the first notable one being in 2011 when the Fate Zero anime came out. Back then it felt like nobody even heard of this franchise, so we were all ecstatic when old and new fans started coming out of the woodworks to share our love and passion for this franchise together. As an avid cosplayer and attendee of many an anime convention over the last 15 or so years, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that the Type Moon fandom has been the most nice, inclusive, and drama-free cosplay group that I've ever had the privilege to be a part of. Most of that we always attributed to the fans just having maturity and good taste, honestly, but we always welcomed the newcomers with open arms. We were always excited to see new fans come in and appreciate this franchise as much as we did. When Fate Grand Order came out, the series underwent the greatest surge in popularity that it's ever seen, and it flew straight into the mainstream. Overnight, Fate went from an obscure niche to a powerhouse of a franchise, introducing tons of new people into the material, and honestly, I couldn't be happier for it. The problem comes up, of course, when you have, on one hand, all these new people getting into the franchise just off of Grand Order, and they have no clue how deep and nuanced any of the older works are. Then on the other hand, you have the old school elitists who dismiss all the new works as bad and refer to the newer fans as condescending terms like secondaries because they didn't get into the series back in like 2002 with a fan translation of Tsukihime on Windows 2000 or some other crap like that. I got into Type Moon back in 2010. Back then, the only anime we had was the Dean anime. I remember when the Dean Limited Blade Works movie just came out, and Fate Zero was still a light novel back then. And guess what? I enjoy the franchise just as much today as I did back then. I really can't even begin to tell you guys how amazing it has been to see the growth of this franchise over the years with so many amazing fans and cosplayers. It was like, look at this thing that I've loved and nurtured for so many years, watch it grow into something awesome that attracts the admiration of so many wonderful, wonderful people.
My best friend slash wife introduced me to Fate, and I've loved it ever since because of all the characters who are outlandish and based on so many different like famous, infamous people. It's just really entertaining to see them fight. I've been kind of like a history nerd growing up, and it's part of the fun is like trying to figure out who everybody is. And
before I was into Type Moon, I was into Mobile Suit Gundam, and that has, as you know, like 20-something series. So when I found Type Moon and it had all of this other stuff, I mean, it's just something I could put time into like looking into, and there was a whole plethora of content that I could really get invested in.
So I really like how the servant summoning system works, how you can bring heroes in history.
So I think it's really cool that they decided to go the route of taking different historical figures or different mythological stories and things from different regions and cultures and mixing it all into something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's still really cool. I just absolutely love a lot of the designs that they come up with for some of the characters.
It's just really unique, and it's just like this ever-expanding universe that...
I think it's the creativity behind it. They always have something new going on there, and with all the ideas they have around heroes, it's just neat.
We're going to add some concepts to this we typically don't see in most animes, even tabletop functions. So I really like that they're willing to take that push and do it with the Fate universe and with the Tsukihime universe in that concept.
And just how interesting the characters are and how they'll take some liberties in order to explore the smaller details of a character's personality, whether it be a historical character or somebody from legend.
I think it was a great idea that could be executed a little bit better, but I mean, I love it all the same.
As an English major, I am obsessed with all the legends and stories, and grew up with them as with my dad telling me them and our family history. So I just love seeing all the legends brought to life and how they're brought to life and work together.
My favorite thing is how expansive and detailed the world building is and how deep the lore runs. And of course, I really love Fate and all the concept of heroic spirits. I think it just leaves so much room for creativity.
Type Moon is a massive, massive universe with a lot of lore, and when it comes to things I like to sink my teeth into something.
As much of a mythology nerd as I am, I absolutely love to see their takes on them. But a lot of the writing and the characters themselves, the personalities they give some of these people, I absolutely love seeing their takes on them.
It's a whole network of ideas to use to create a original work out of.
And I just absolutely love how the characters go up against each other and how they're matched and which ones are which. It just makes me so happy to see how good that works out.
I think it's kind of interesting to look at the growth and what his original idea for what kind of story he wanted to write was versus like later on the Fate stuff. Like if you look at Tsukihime, it's kind of like a continuation of Kara no Kyokai. You know, he got the mystic eyes, the death perception. That was kind of his thing.
I'm not gonna lie, the moment Gil showed up, I kind of got hooked into it. But then, like, on the long run, after reading more about it, it was honestly how good the writing is when you start reading material outside of the shows.
I guess the most important thing to me was probably just the atmosphere and the storytelling. It was just very, very, I don't know, kind of somber, but also interesting and impactful. So that's my little rant.
So what first drew me to Type Moon was the visual novel, which I really enjoyed because it was like playing 3 different visual novels in the same game. Definitely Fate Zero.
Fate Zero. Fate Zero.
Probably the Fate Extra series.
Fate Extra, hands down.
Gotta go with Fate Extra.
My favorite one, obviously, is Melty Blood.
Fate Zero, by far.
My favorite work is Kara no Kyokai / Garden of Sinners.
Alright, so it's Apocrypha.
The original Fate Stay Night visual novel.
Fate Apocrypha, I think, is my favorite.
If Apocrypha were done by a studio that knew what it was doing, it would be Apocrypha. Otherwise, it's Unlimited Blade Works.
Well, you've heard it. If Fate Apocrypha was done by a different animation team, it would probably be Apocrypha.
Carnival Phantasm.
Huge thanks to everyone at MomoCon 2019 for helping put together this video. You guys are the best friends and best community I could possibly ever ask for. Bottom line, the new fans shouldn't use surface level analysis based on one person saying something mean on the internet to assume that an entire fandom is bad. And the old fans shouldn't try to gatekeep what types of people can read a comic or play a video game. It's just ridiculous. I feel like internet culture has really damaged our ability to properly cope with these things and our outlook on them. But that's a topic for an entirely other video altogether, so I'll spare you guys the boredom for that. A very hot topic recently has been, how do I get into Fate? And that's actually a pretty valid question at this point, considering the overwhelming amount of works that are out there now. But rather than tell you to just jump in headfirst to Grand Order or to download a ROM of Tsukihime, I'm going to give you the most moderate approach to the franchise as possible. What I wanted to do for this video series was to take you through the entire franchise, how I experienced it, and explain my recommended watch order and why I believe in it. You can watch it really in any way you want to, but I wanted to explain and justify my particular watch order and why I think it's worth considering. You guys really have no idea. Like, the idea of making this video, it's like I'm stuck in Inception and this idea has been like deeply implanted into my subconscious to make this video series, and I can't stop thinking about it. I think about it when I get up in the morning, I think about it all the time, and my only choice is to just move forward and just make it. So here we go. Let's start at the very beginning, where it all began, with a history lesson of what Type Moon is before we move on to any of the individual works. Type Moon was founded in 1998 by Kanoko Nasu and his longtime friend Takashi Takeuchi. Their first major published work was a series called Kara no Kyokai, a series of short stories we'll go over much later in this series because they had film adaptations a few years down the road, which I'd like to cover on this video series. Nasu would handle the writing and the story, while Takeuchi would handle the character design and the art. Type Moon would really leave its mark on the map in 2000 with Tsukihime. Rather than being released as a light novel or a doujin, Tsukihime was released as a computer software interactive story, similar to the choose-your-own-adventure RPGs we had over here in the States during the 90s. Visual novels were kind of an up-and-coming genre at the time, so there weren't a lot of other games out there like it. Tsukihime, along with Kara no Kyokai and Nasu's other short stories like Notes, all featured a similar setting, with an emphasis on magic set in the modern day. None of these shied away from being dark, gritty, and disturbing. All of these series deal with very interesting themes as well, such as things never tend to be as they seem, whether that be due to magic or the characters simply questioning what they're seeing in front of them. It's not uncommon for characters to go completely insane throughout the events of these stories when things start to stark contrast the reality they thought was possible. Many aspects of how magic itself worked within this universe, as well as organizations and locations, are sometimes mentioned between the different works, which caused people to believe that maybe they had some kind of soft continuity with each other, similar to the works of Clamp. This brings us to the definition of what fans call the Nasuverse. The shared storylines that Nasu wrote that are all loosely connected through different themes or references, although there's still debate to this day about which ones are truly connected and what the actual chronology of the Type Moon universe at Nasuverse really is. Tsukihime would feature two alternate story routes, titled simply The Near Side of the Moon and The Far Side of the Moon, where your actions throughout the game in the story would impact the outcome you ended up with at the end of the game. As for the plot itself of Tsukihime, it deals with a lot of interesting themes and concepts, as we follow our main protagonist Shiki Tono as he descends into the madness of his own mind. The plot itself deals with Shiki being forced to live with his extended family and their maids, while dealing with an encounter with a real-life vampire and the magical underworld that is associated with her. Shiki also is touched by magic and has a rather unique ability for himself as well, the Mystic Eyes of Death. Were it not for a special pair of glasses given to him, everything Shiki would see would have red lines all over it. These lines would represent threads that would tie everything together in its current state, and thus, if these threads are cut, would destroy that object or kill that person. Tsukihime was a very successful visual novel, but it's a shame it was never adapted into any other works. No anime, no manga, nothing. What are you looking at me like that for? There is no Tsukihime anime. Okay, we all know the joke. In all honesty, the biggest crime of the Tsukihime anime, if we're not judging it as an adaptation of the visual novel, which most people do, is that it's just boring. I've seen the entire series from beginning to end, and I can barely recall a few scenes, and I mostly bought the DVD as a joke. And although I don't regret buying it, I remember so little about it, I didn't even remember it had these awful interlaced subtitles that don't even match up with the English dub whatsoever. Now, of course, this would be the perfect setup for internet content creator reviews a bad thing and makes fun of it, and gets really angry at it, but if I'm being honest, I don't have that much to say about the Tsukihime anime, at least not yet. I didn't watch it until years after becoming a Type Moon fan, and so I don't really have that nostalgia or repeat viewings of it. Maybe one day I'd like to do a video on it, but we're going to save that for another time. After releasing the Tsukihime Plus edition, which came with the expansion pack Kagetsu Toya, Type Moon would go back to the drawing board to design their next visual novel. They would most certainly make improvements to the quality of their assets, but most importantly, their design sensibilities as well. This new game would go on to be one of Type Moon's most successful products to date, and eventually lead to a worldwide phenomenon. Enter Fate's Stay Night in 2004, released for the PC and featuring many different variant cover arts and different release runs. Fate's Stay Night featured much improved visuals using digitized real-life photography of environments, improved character art, UI, and music. Fate would also feature 3 playable routes to Tsukihime's 2. These routes would simply be called the Fate Route, Unlimited Blade Works, and Heaven's Feel. The story of Fate's Stay Night follows a young Shiro Emiya, a boy orphaned by a disastrous fire when he was a kid. He was saved from the fire and adopted by a man named Kiritsugu. Kiritsugu was a mage. However, he never taught Shiro any magic while growing up because he didn't want Shiro to follow in his footsteps. Shiro admired his adoptive father's ambition to help and save people, and so he dedicates his life to the people who died in the tragedy and commits himself to becoming a hero of justice, as he calls it. The later routes reveal that there's a lot more to this wish than the simple childlike naivete for wanting to help people. For obvious reasons, Shiro is deeply traumatized by the events of the fire 10 years ago. He feels an enormous amount of guilt for being the only survivor, blaming himself that he didn't do enough to try to help those other people even though he was just a scared kid at the time. His survivor's guilt complex leads him to martyr himself willingly at every turn to help people, overexhausting himself to help other people who don't deserve it, or throwing himself into harm's way so that other people don't get hurt. Yet he has a hard time manifesting his emotions around other people and becoming close to them. Much like Shiki Tono before him, Shiro is mentally torturing himself. But unlike Shiki, Shiro is a much more engaging and relatable protagonist and doesn't do some of the morally reprehensible things that Shiki does. He gets his chance at heroism a lot sooner than expected when he's thrust into an ancient magical ritual called the Holy Grail War, where select capable magi call upon the spiritual manifestations of ancient heroes and historically important figures, such as King Arthur or Alexander the Great, to fight for them and claim the ultimate prize, the Holy Grail, which can grant any wish you desire. Now, I'm a sucker for alternate history and battle royale stories, so this was a slam dunk for me.
There's a bit more to it than that.
Because of the way the premise is presented, you can make slight little modifications to the way things play out here and there and end up with radically different outcomes, and that becomes endlessly entertaining. That's why the Fate formula works so well. It lends itself to alternate storylines and outcomes very easily. It really is an amazing spin on your typical anime storyline of average high school boy suddenly discovers his magical destiny, or isekai stories. It avoids a lot of the cliches that this oversaturated genre is typically bogged down with. Our protagonist is not a blank slate audience proxy self-insert. He's not a Mary Sue that's inherently liked by everyone around him or overpowered for no reason, and the atmosphere still manages to really suck you in. The fantasy aspects of the story are downplayed enough to where you're still able to immerse yourself without creating a huge disconnect to the characters or the setting. The stakes are high, and the main character actually has to struggle to overcome adversity rather than just winning all the time because he's just awesome like that. The way the visual novel itself parameterizes the different routes is downright amazing from a storytelling perspective. Most video games with alternate story routes and endings give you a sort of pick the storyline that appeals to you the most from a moral standpoint perspective, whereas the storylines in Fate actually build upon the elements established in the previous route. They're technically not one linear timeline, they're all alternate story routes, but you can almost perceive it as one linear timeline if you play them in order and you contextualize it through the perspective of Shiro and his ideals. Shiro thinks he has to save everyone and that no one should get hurt while he has anything to say about it. He hastily martyrs himself on every possible opportunity when he could have just as easily run away to preserve his life, all just to prove he can be a hero when he's woefully outmatched in the particular fight he's up against. In the Unlimited Blade Works route, he's forced to come face to face with the outcome of what his ideals represent and where they will take him, challenging the belief he's held all his life. In the Heaven's Feel route, he's presented with stakes so dire, with so much on the line, he's forced to discard his idealism altogether to achieve one heroic act and save the person that means the most to him. What a wonderful way to wrap up a character arc. Fate also has a soft harem aspect to it as well, but this is handled more subtly and tastefully than you might think, almost to the point where I think it's not even worth considering it part of the harem genre. Tsukihime had this as well, but it's done better and more seamlessly integrated into the story here in Fate. Each route has a different romance with a different female character, and each route takes the time to really make you understand why Shiro would fall for each of these women respectfully. So it's very well done. It doesn't interrupt the story or the tone at all. Honestly, it enhances it. I keep feeling like I'm forgetting something. What could that be? Oh right, the porn. So yeah, the original versions of both Tsukihime and Fate Stay Night had hentai scenes in them. They're well drawn and tasteful for the most part, but there's only a few of them and they're spread out by hours of gameplay and reading, so the game itself doesn't really serve its purpose as a hentai. And if you're trying to enjoy the game for the story, then these scenes being interlaced with their awful dialogue and awful translations grind the whole thing to a halt. These scenes were so inconsequential and frankly poorly written that future versions of Fate Stay Night would eliminate them altogether. Which brings me to 2005 and Fate Stay Night Realta Nua, which was released for the PC and the PS2 and later released for the Vita. This version would eliminate the hentai scenes altogether, bringing it to a wider audience. It would also feature heavily enhanced visuals and an amazing score. This version would also add voiced lines of dialogue to the game, and these voice actors would continue to reprise their roles in every Fate incarnation in the future, never to be recast.
そういう君は分かりやすいな。総兵には最速の英雄が選ばれるというが。
They were also nice enough to sign my PS2 copy here. Yes, that's Archer and Lancer's signature there. Not that I'm bragging or anything. Anyways, Fate Stay Night was met with high critical acclaim. It went on to become the best-selling visual novel to date the year it came out. So, naturally, an anime adaptation was inevitable, right? Oh, so that's why he didn't want to review the Tsukihime anime. He's getting shit on the awful Dean anime instead. Well, this is where my opinion differs from a lot of traditional Fate fans. It's a big pet peeve of mine when people dismiss this series as bad without really taking the time to explain why. Is it objectively bad, or is it just a bad adaptation of the visual novel? Also, it's a major pet peeve of mine when people just say things are just bad, like, don't read that, it's bad, don't play that, it's bad, don't watch that, it's bad, without really taking the time to explain what they mean and extrapolate on the meaning of bad. I hear this in so many different contexts. We have such a diverse language. Please use some other words and describe what you mean rather than saying something is just bad. I cannot stand that, but again, rant for another video. A lot of times it comes down to what is the better form of media to tell that particular story. Sometimes stories lend themselves better to visuals, sometimes they lend themselves better to words, where you can kind of use your imagination to fill in the blanks, such as a novel. Bottom line, this is the superior form of media to tell this story. But the anime does have some storytelling advantages that the visual novel does not. So when it comes to the question of how do I get into Fate, I cannot advocate enough, do not skip this series. So, in the next video, we're going to find out what exactly made this series so infamous. Join me next time for Fate Stay Night, the Dean anime. So if you're still watching at this point, thank you so much for the engagement and for the support. I really, really do appreciate that a lot. I'm really serious about this video series being successful to the extent that it can be. I know it's nothing groundbreaking, but you're dealing with somebody that works 50 plus hours a week, and all of their editing skills are self-taught over just practice. I never took any courses on it or anything like that. I have limited access to technology. I can't put an extreme amount of money into this right now because I'm working on getting a house and getting married, so it is what it is. I'm really, 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 really looking forward to making this series into something special. This first video is sort of just a recap of everything we already know about Type Moon and just sort of the moderate's guide approach to it. The other videos in the series will go into much more detail about my personal opinions on each individual works, and I'm still kind of torn as to how I want to present those, if I want to go through the story elements point by point, or if I want to kind of deconstruct everything in terms of its individual merits, like animation quality and overall story quality and adaptation quality, things like that. But if you guys do actually care about this video series being successful, it seems petty, it seems like the cliche YouTuber thing to say, but leave a like, because that does actually impact the video's visibility to other people who are search foring it or watching related videos to it. Leave a like, share it on social media, post it in other anime-related groups, Type Moon-related groups, do whatever you guys can to help me out, and I really, really, really appreciate that. Thank you guys so much for your help with this. I really do appreciate that a lot.